Good evening. Tonight, a special investigation into what may turn out to be the greatest inside job in Afghanistan's history. Perhaps one of the saddest ironies of Afghanistan today is that while the country is poor economically, geologists have recently determined that underneath all those mountains and high deserts rests perhaps trillions, yes, trillions of dollars in valuable metals. The rush to mine those metals is going full bore. The Afghans don't have the technology to do it themselves, but there is no shortage of companies from other countries willing to step in and help. The outcome of the first big contract was supposed to be an example of how foreign investment will help Afghanistan get on its feet economically. But turning metals into money hasn't exactly gone as planned. It's a dangerous ride. Our reporting team of Maura Axelrod and Lucian Reed are being driven out to the desert to see the future of Afghanistan. 20 miles south of Kabul, in Logar province, is the largest foreign investment project in the country. It's never been seen by Western reporters before this trip. We are riding in what becomes a heavily armed convoy. Afghan National Police escort us to a dusty hilltop. The place is called Mes Aynak. Guarded by a special unit of the Afghan police, this unremarkable-looking patch of hardscrabble is seen as key to Afghanistan's future. Not because of what's on the surface, but what's underneath. Copper. Nearly 2 billion tons of valuable ore, according to geologists. It bears repeating that the country is desperately poor, one of the poorest on earth. There's virtually no industry to speak of other than maybe the opium business. So the huge potential for this untapped wealth could be a game changer. But only if it ends up making life better for the average Afghan.
If we fail in our collective effort to ensure this wealth benefits the Afghan people, then security will be a problem.
If there was any question about how seriously the Pentagon takes its role of developing Afghanistan's mineral resources, Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Paul Brinkley's recent press conference in Kabul made things explicitly clear.
Our belief, and this is experiential, is that work that benefits people in local communities, that creates jobs and schools and health care, secures itself. Local people do not attack things that benefit them.
Brinkley and a team of U.S. geologists had just completed a year-long assessment, poring over old Soviet-era maps and heading out into the field to conduct new surveys.
And those deposits, if developed, will generate billions of dollars.
Their conclusion? Not only would the discovery of this potential wealth benefit Afghanistan, it would have profound implications for the United States war effort.
The mineral wealth, the staggering nature of the mineral wealth, is the way forward. If there is a prosperous Afghanistan to emerge as a trading partner, both in the region and internationally, it will be based on a responsible development of its mineral assets.
And the Mes Aynak mine site is only the beginning. Hidden beneath the vast mountain ranges all across the country are enormous veins of precious metals, including gold and lithium, a mineral used to make batteries for cell phones, and more copper. It's a motherlode of minerals, worth trillions of dollars. Brinkley says all that ore will help stabilize the country so U.S. troops can return home. It all seems like the perfect good news story. Afghanistan becomes prosperous and American forces can go home. But one American geologist who worked in Afghanistan says there's a big problem. A Chinese company won the bid for the mine.
Historically, if you look at how they've developed projects in other countries, they bring in their own labor force, they bring in their own materials from China, there's no secondary suppliers, so consequently the supply chain is vertically integrated with the Chinese, whereas if it was a Western company, we'd have to seek suppliers. People would have an opportunity to set up businesses. You would see an expansion of the economy that would be based on resource development.
Jim Yeager is an American geologist with 35 years of experience working around the world in the mining business. He's now a manager at a gold mine in the Central Asian country of Tajikistan. But a few years back, when the bidding for the Afghan copper mine came up, he had a front row seat. Yeager was hired by the World Bank to help the Afghan Ministry of Mines learn how to properly conduct the bidding process. And he was worried that the desperately poor Afghans living around the mine in Logar province were going to end up with nothing.
Well, I think the most important thing is that the people have jobs, that the money goes to the people. You know, that the community of Logar is developed, that the other communities that have mining will in fact benefit greatly from it. And the money should go down, you know, to that level.
But so far, despite a slew of promises from the Chinese, Yeager says there is no mine and few jobs.
他们是第一家这个西方的媒体到这个营地里边来，这个包括我们这个公司领导接受采访，大概是这是第一家。
Liu Xinguo runs the copper mine operation in Afghanistan. We had been eager to hear what the Chinese mining officials had to say about allegations from Yeager and others, and we were surprised and appreciative when we were allowed to visit.
我相信啊，我本人相信，就他们看到的一切会客观地加以报道。
Liu was eager to tell our reporters that he and his mining company, MCC, owned and operated by the Chinese government, are going to bring economic development to this desperate region.
可以想象一个现代化的企业在这个矿区里边，就在这个矿区外边啊，这个周边啊建成。
At a small press conference for a few Afghan journalists and our reporters, the mine officials insisted that they were working with the locals to build a brighter, more prosperous Afghanistan.
这个周边的一些这个村民呐，经过培训以后，会到我们这个企业来就业，他们的生活方式会从此发生改变。
But many Afghans are wondering, where are all the jobs? It's been more than 3 years since the Chinese won the bid, and digging has yet to begin. Even the Chinese acknowledge that large-scale development for the local economy is at least another 5 or 10 years away. But they insist it is coming.
According to the mining contract, we of course shoulder the responsibility to benefit all these villages around this part.
For now, however, the so-called economic future of Afghanistan is only a series of prefab outbuildings. And while there are quite a few Chinese workers at the site, filling the cafeteria and wandering around the barracks, spotting any Afghans here is pretty difficult. Yeager's prediction that the Chinese would renege on promises for local jobs and development work seems to be coming true. And he wasn't the only one saying that. Michael Stanley is a mining engineer with the World Bank. And with the massive untapped underground potential at Mes Aynak and across the country, he's spending a lot of time in Afghanistan these days.
There's no question that these are some very large resources, undeveloped. And in a world that is on something of a razor's edge right now in terms of supply and demand, these deposits will be highly contested.
And Stanley believes other countries will soon be following the Chinese lead into Afghanistan.
The growth in mineral demand is correlated to population, and it's also highly correlated to industrialization. So, I mean, you've probably seen that everyone's discussing China. We tend to discuss Brazil, Russia, India, China. As those big countries industrialize, the demand for mineral products goes up with them. So the global trend now in the industry is for more frontier exploration in places that previously didn't see a lot of exploration.
But Stanley has been working with the Afghan government trying to make sure that new mining operations in the country are done right. He said there was a time when Western mining companies would scour the world looking to exploit resources with little benefit to the local population. But there's been a change of thought in the last decade.
It was really only about the year 2000 that the industry really understood the importance of sharing benefits with the community, having consultation, making the community your partner, and making sure that you explain to them what's happening, and that they really feel that they have ownership in the operation, because then you'll have a more successful, viable operation. But if you're in conflict with your local community, you really have a very serious problem.
And that's beginning to be the case in Afghanistan. The bedrock of economic development, finding jobs for thousands of Afghans to work at the mine, still hasn't happened. And after waiting 3 years, the locals have had enough.
What would a normal person living in a village would say if he doesn't get his rights? He would immediately say, I want to pick up guns. That's the only skill they have learned in the last 30 years.
Javeed Noorani, who works with a group that investigates corruption in the Afghan government, took our reporters to meet some of the villagers living around the mine to hear their grievances firsthand. They showed him formal letters of protest they had sent to various government officials. And since many of the locals are illiterate, they signed with thumbprints. They said their concerns have been ignored, and Noorani gave us a rough translation.
We are people of Aynak, and we have been living here, and we have documents, but our land, we need compensation for the land that we have.
They said they had lost their homeland, and the Chinese efforts to resettle the villagers were falling short. Concerns like these are not what the West wants to hear. The United States almost desperately believes projects like Mes Aynak need to work for Afghanistan's young democracy to survive. We asked to see the specifics of the Chinese contract from the Afghan Ministry of Mines, but after saying they would show us, they ultimately refused. Noorani says what is most worrisome is that according to leaked documents he's seen, most of the skilled workers at the mine are supposed to be Afghan, even though there are few trained miners in the country.
And the government is also not bothered, to train them. They, the best they can tell you, well, we have sent some 5 people, to China on scholarship to come back, and then they fill up those positions. 5 people, come on, cannot fill up, a project that requires 4,000 people.
He expects that in the end, the Chinese will just bring over more Chinese to work the mine, filling the barracks that already have been built on the site.
They argue well, saying you don't have the kind of people we require for the work. And the government says, yes, we don't have it. So what was the next thing? They will be importing a lot of people from outside. So how is it going to benefit the local Afghans?
Bottom line is the financial proposal was only 25% of the whole proposal.
In his report, Jim Yeager cautioned that while the Chinese bid was indeed for the most money, other factors were supposed to have been considered during the bidding process.
They won the financial side, no question. They also won everything else, even if the fact that they were just going to send 5 scholarships to China, other than what Hunter Dickinson was going to do on really providing an educational opportunity for Afghanistan.
Hunter Dickinson is a Canadian mining company that bid on the mine. And Yeager said that while their bid was lower, they would have done a lot more to train and educate locals.
Hunter Dickinson, in their proposal, would set up a junior college or some kind of an institution right in Logar province to train the workers, to train the miners, to train the engineers, and work with the university to provide the advanced curriculum and classes so that you could have these professionals and really provide jobs for the Afghans.
And the Chinese mining operation, according to Yeager, won't win any awards for being green either.
The Chinese have the old-fashioned smokestack, burn it up the chimney it goes, where both Hunter Dickinson and Freeport had technology that was much cleaner, much more environmentally friendly, and much more efficient. but nobody scored that to say that they were better than the Chinese. But in fact, they were.
In the meantime, many of the local villagers we talked to said that they are disillusioned, an ominous sign for Americans who hope that economic development from mining would lead to greater security. When we return, a final bit of irony to our Afghan story. That's next, so stay here with us. According to U.S. diplomatic cables obtained by WikiLeaks and given to us by the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten, there were grave concerns about the economic development at Mes Aynak within the U.S. Embassy. One note said, "Communities near the mine are frustrated, few jobs are available." Another added that despite promises of hundreds of jobs, during a recent visit to the mine, few Afghan workers were visible. And a Chinese mining official is quoted as saying the company is training local farmers to grow Chinese vegetables, but he could offer no other examples of community involvement projects. But what had Yeager even more disturbed was how the Chinese ended up with the mine in the first place. He says he became suspicious during the bidding process that there was something fishy going on.
When the Chinese company scored in the 90th percentile and the other company scored within the 60th percentile, something just didn't look right with the numbers.
When the Chinese were awarded the mine, Yeager did not believe they won it fair and square, and he says he felt compelled to act.
This is a rather major event that really was underneath the radar screen, and if it was just dropped after the Chinese got it and everybody thought it was, completely hunky-dory, well, that wasn't the case.
Yeager and other foreign observers wrote a 78-page report that was startling. It detailed numerous problems in the bidding process. For example, the report says no one individual company showed an advantage in every evaluation category, but curiously, a number of evaluators gave MCC, the Chinese company, quote, a perfect score in all categories.
It's an anomaly. I look at data all the time and something is wrong with that. Nobody will write a perfect proposal. Well, it indicated that there is favoritism being played to the Chinese. I mean, that was how I'd interpret the data.
And Yeager told us it went beyond favoritism. He suspected bribes. As it happened, his hunch may be right. The Washington Post quoted a U.S. official as saying the Afghan Minister of Mines accepted a $30 million bribe from the Chinese. And that accusation was backed up in another WikiLeaks document we obtained from the Norwegian newspaper. In it, an unnamed U.S. diplomat quoted a source as saying the Aynak copper mine was, quote, 100% corrupt, and that Afghan officials saw the Chinese company as, quote, a cow to milk for bribes.
All of these WikiLeaks go through your embassy.
Just after Yeager's report was released, the Minister of Mines accused of the bribe, Ibrahim Adel, was fired. Former Mining Minister Adel, living outside Kabul, denied accepting anything.
There is not any place for bribery. I was not the only man.
And the Chinese manager of the mine also denied that there were any payoffs.
这是第一个问题。第二个问题关于这个竞标的事儿，是这样，我相信咱们在座的任何一个人，这个世界上的人，谁都没有证据。
It's important to note that the Chinese insist that they are innocent, and the United States government has not publicly pressed any accusations of bribery. And for those who are busy working on building Afghanistan's struggling economy, many say that you can't expect Western standards of operation in this part of the world. According to the Pentagon's Paul Brinkley, what's important is that investment is taking place.
I do believe we have benefited from the fact that a major Chinese company has come and invested in a mine here has helped our efforts to encourage international companies to come. In a broader sense, I think it is completely healthy for Afghanistan to have commercial partnerships with all of the surrounding nations and with the international community so that everyone has a stake in the security of Afghanistan.
Paul Brinkley has recently resigned his position at the Pentagon. This after Congress tried to move his job and his staff to the State Department. It should be noted that the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff complained about the move, saying Brinkley and his team were essential to the war effort. Now, when we return on the program, an ominous sign for Americans who hope that economic development from mining would lead to greater security. It is sometimes called red gold. And for the last several years, copper, in production and price, has been going through the roof worldwide. The value has more than quadrupled. That's because demand is also up, way up. Not only is copper used in everything from plumbing to wiring, you can also find it in cell phones and laptops. The average car has more than 50 pounds of copper wiring. The United States has long been a world leader in copper production. Welcome to Ely, Nevada. This open pit is one of the largest copper mines in our country. Billions of pounds of ore have been pulled from this area for more than a century. And that's the problem. Most of the easily mined copper deposits around the world have been found. But the market demands more. And that's especially true in the hyper-economy that is China. With 38% of the market share, the Chinese have become the world's largest copper consumer. And that's why you see the Chinese going to all corners of the globe and to extraordinary lengths in search of untapped minerals. Which brings us back to Mes Aynak. Tonight, we've been looking at the debate surrounding Afghanistan's Mes Aynak mine, from allegations of bribery to what it means for the fate of the local Afghans themselves. But we conclude our story with a final twist.
On the left, we have a place which had been probably mined during antiquity.
You see, this region is steeped in history as well as copper. On a bright, brisk winter day, our reporters once again headed out to the mine site, this time in the company of Philippe Marquis. He directs a team of archaeologists funded by the French government, and they are in a race against time.
The monastery is divided in three parts. There is here an open courtyard.
Smack dab on top of the mine site at Mes Aynak, Marquis and his team are busily excavating a Buddhist monastery and surrounding structures that suggest a thriving community was here just after the time of Christ.
And here we are entering the center of the monastery.
And they have found evidence that people were living here even earlier.
The roof of this square room was supported by wooden pillars.
It was an important stop along the famed Silk Road, the trade route linking China and India to Europe.
And then you have these moldings here.
For centuries, the ruins here were untouched and largely forgotten. But soon these ancient bricks and all they contain will be blown to dust by the miners' dynamite. That's right. When mining begins, all of this will disappear.
So this is part where, you see these green stones. This green color is due to the fact that there is a copper in it. It's very easy to notice this kind of color. And all over the mountains you see that there is huge places where you can see this green stone.
From what Marquis is unearthing, it looks like what drew people here in antiquity is the same thing that's bringing them here now: copper. And it's not just a trace of green in the rock. He's found enormous amounts of slag, the telltale byproduct of copper production.
So it's really tons and tons of slags which I left, and it means that it was tons and tons of copper which had been processed here.
The archaeologists have discovered a primitive mining and processing operation that they believe was conducted on a grand scale.
Imagine this part of the mountains swarming with people extracting the copper, and then here maybe an area where people were processing the copper.
Much of what they find at the site is brought here to the Afghan National Museum. The pieces are studied and cleaned, and some of the pieces, like this lamp, are made out of that precious copper.
It was like a oil lamp.
A curator showed us copper coins discovered at the mine site. More evidence that a rich and vibrant culture existed there for centuries.
The coins which we discovered from Mes Aynak, there we can see at the rivers of the coins different goddess. It means that during that times, different religions were in Afghanistan.
Back at Mes Aynak, it's not exactly clear how much time the archaeologists have. Marquis told us that to do everything properly would take about 10 years. But it's clear that the Chinese will not wait that long. Marquis told us recently that they would give him 3 years, hopefully.
The Ministry of Mine didn't tell us about this information.
The Chinese say they weren't told about the archaeological site when they bid on the mine. They told our reporters they are now waiting on the archaeologists to come up with a plan.
So for the specific delay,
At the press conference, Liu, the Chinese mining official, had this to say.
这个是这样啊，这个现在看来，文物呢对这个整个项目的影响是非常大的。但是我们不能说为了开矿啊，中国呢具有非常悠久的文化历史，我们尊重阿富汗的这种传统的文化和宗教信仰。当然，我们会建议呢，这个阿富汗政府能够尽量抓紧工作，把这个对项目的影响时间尽量压缩。
The Chinese say they now expect that to be in 2014. But there's no question what will happen to this place once mining begins.
This is open pit, you know.
Sorry? Open pit.
Open pit.
It's going to be an open pit mine, like the one we saw earlier in Nevada. And that means this ancient landscape will change forever.
Okay. Nothing will exist.
None of this will exist.
Yeah.
And that is the great irony of the Mes Aynak mine. Millennia ago, copper brought this place wealth. It supported a complex and organized society. Now the mineral is once again seen as the means to a vibrant economy. But mining the ore will mean destroying a cultural heritage.
Afghanistan at this time was a rich country with, I would say, organized political structure. I think that we can guess that this copper which was produced there during antiquity, it was exported in such countries as today India or Iran or even China.
And Marquis' excavation now employs hundreds of local Afghans, injecting money into the economy.
They are working for the Afghan government, yes, employed by the Ministry of Culture, and they are coming from the villages all around here.
But he says the workers are earning more than just money. They are gaining new pride and a sense of history.
We are providing them with something which they never had before. It's a kind of education about their history, and when you discuss with them, they are very proud of it. They say, okay, yes, we have been a great country. Look, the statue we were able to build. Look, the building we were able to build. Look, the way we have been mining all these mountains. And and they are proud of it, and they are right to be proud of it.
And as to the global competition for resources, it's important to note that in addition to our war effort in Afghanistan, the United States has poured in billions of dollars of aid, building schools, roads, and so forth. And we provide such aid to countries around the world. The policy of the United States is to do so without tying that aid to our companies winning contracts. But the Chinese, with their state-run businesses, operate differently. Afghan government officials told us they would prefer to give contracts to countries that have contributed to their country's stability, but the process is the process. And many people we talk to say that Western companies will not be able to compete with this new reality. When we come back, the man responsible for giving out billions of dollars after the great Gulf underwater oil gusher is facing many tough questions. You'll want to hear what he has to say.